cannot do very well with a single screen
No,
laptop.
no, no, no. Okay. So essentially, I knew this was going to be more conversational, or at least I thought it was going to be more conversational than anything else. So really, I just put down some topics and thoughts on what I know of as some key items within property management, both for managing properties for yourself, but also managing the process as a real estate agent, like what you need to know as you're helping your clients buy and sell rental properties. And so feel free to just make this conversational between us, Fran. But the first topic that I have here is really on the selling and purchasing because the main audience for this is real estate agents. But as you're helping your clients and investors be able to prep their properties for sale, are there any things that you typically focus on as a property manager, knowing that a property is going to be prepared for sale? Do you increase any or get longer leases? Do you shorten leases? Are there any maintenance items that you do or any prep items that you do knowing that a property is going to be for sale?
I would say in most cases, our client typically will drive that. Also, the property type may have an influence. So, as an example, side-by-side duplexes are very attractive, often to owner occupants. And so,
Mm-hmm.
if there is a tenant on a month-to-month lease, often we're directed essentially to leave them as is, so that a potential new owner could move into that side. For more tried and true investment style, like upper lower duplexes, those kinds of things, achieving top tier rents, locking into leases is the prerogative of some people. Others prefer the flexibility, other new owners prefer the flexibility of putting their own tenants in. And so truly it is like a case by case basis. I can't say necessarily that one works better than the other. I think it's largely influenced by who your target investor is that you're trying to sell to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then how about as you absorb a new property? So any things that you wish you received as a property manager with a new property, things like, um, so I always prepare when I'm selling my multifamilies, or even single families that are leased. I always make sure that I get a copy of the current lease,
Mhm.
proof of the security deposit. So if we still have the receipt of the security deposit, I try to get that. I fill out the top portion of the addendum R. It drives me crazy when listing agents don't.
Oh, I might have lost you. Are you there?
Uh-oh, do you not do that?
Oh
Yeah,
no, now
oh,
I
did
can.
I cut
No, no,
out
I'm
for a
sorry.
bit?
Yeah, yeah, you cut it there.
Oh, we're having connection issues.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be a funny clip. It's going to be us just frozen. But I also try to get estoppels from each of the different tenants
Yes.
to prove. So the lease proves what the landlord thinks that they're going to be paying, but the estoppel proves what the tenant thinks that they're going to be paying. And usually these two things match, but not always. So I think it's a good double check, and I don't see that commonly. Do you see that commonly?
It is not common. It is preferred because, as you indicated, like sometimes there's a difference between what the landlord thinks they're getting, and what the tenant thinks they're paying for. Commonly, I would say the
Mm-hmm.
most discrepancies we see are either security deposit, especially for like very long-term tenants,
Mm-hmm.
or utilities. So those are both helpful things. Things we like to see
What
to
do
go
you
back
mean by
to.
utilities? Like, what do you mean by utilities? Verification of who's paying?
Yep, yep, exactly. So like the landlord, most often what we see is the tenant doesn't realize that they're paying for gas. Because a lot of times electric and gas is combined, and so they think they're paying for just electricity. Even if their
Sure.
lease says they're supposed to pay for gas, they might just not understand what's going on there, and vice versa. So, it's not super common to have that kind of miscommunication, but it certainly does happen, especially with combined utilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Um, how do you typically handle showings with tenants involved? So if the tenants are living there, do you have a recommendation on how to manage showings with tenants?
Yeah, I mean, to be candid, how on board the tenant is can kind of make or break the sale of the property. If you have a very
Mm-hmm.
uncooperative tenant, it can be a real challenge. So, depending on the circumstances, we try and help them understand like that the more helpful they can be, the faster it's going to sell, the less disruption in their lives. If they clean up the property really nice and they essentially do like one round of showings and the property gets sold, they have, maybe 1 or 2 days of like disruption versus if it lasts weeks or months, it can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, largely influenced by a few things. If the tenant is on board and willing to, kind of play ball, and subscribe to the theory that, if they do cooperate, it's done faster, that's usually the best. Certainly, we have some contentious tenants, or, I've been on the purchasing end plenty of times too, where tenants will do a fair amount of um, disruption to the showings, or, new buyers are walking through and, they're telling me all sorts of things they probably shouldn't be saying. So we, from an internal standpoint, like we typically just try and have a quality relationship with them that will translate to an easier sale. And I think
Mm-hmm.
across the board, that's probably going to be the best bet. Usually what we find is it's easiest for the sales realtor to coordinate directly with the tenants,
Mm-hmm.
um, simply because there's a lot of changing of, schedules and when folks are going to be able to show the property. We do generally ask that like there's more lead time than the typical 12 hours, like 24 hours, and you make it during normal business hours. And, we do recognize and want to accommodate that these are, really disruptive to the tenant's life,
Mm-hmm.
and limit it as much as possible. But there's not a lot of value with us being kind of the middleman and coordinating between the two, because there's such variability between who's doing what at whatever specific time. So
Okay.
it is, there's no great one hit wonder rule that's going to fix all the problems. It's just working through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's good to know, I think, that you prefer for the listing agent to be the coordinator with the tenant, even if you have an established relationship with them, or during the sale process, because we are the ones that have the notification on the showing request, and we're just as as little disruption or as few people in between the process as possible.
Right, right. And I
Yeah.
mean, we're there to support. It's just usually a little bit cleaner.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And I have done it a couple different ways with tenants, as you said, depending on who they are and how they like to, interact with people coming into their homes. Sometimes I have done individual showings. Sometimes I have just coordinated a whole set of open houses within that first week or two, so that they know exactly which times are going to be and they can prepare for that. So I think both of those are strategies to use as you're
Yep.
selling. Okay. Hi, Cindy. Nice to see you.
Oops. Good morning.
Good
Morning.
morning. We have Fran on here from Vantage Point Management. We're talking property management today. We just got started. We're talking anyway so that people can have the recording afterwards. But we just started going through. I just have some ideas. I mean, there's a lot in here. I mean, property management in 1 hour is almost impossible, right? We're just going through some high level items. But we
You froze.
Yeah, she's frozen for me
what
too.
you're looking
Come back.
for. And what you're looking for. Am I frozen still?
Now you're back. Now you're frozen.
Am I frozen still?
No, you're good now.
Okay. Goodness, this is a fun call. All right, so into foundations of long-term property investing. This one I don't think we need to talk about too long, but why your clients are looking for long-term property investing, right? We'll go through the cash flow calculation in just a minute. That's the lowest hanging fruit of why people are looking to invest in properties, that they would be able to get some passive, right? Long-term management is not passive. But it is an opportunity to get cash flow from each property. We'll talk about how to calculate that in a minute. Equity. So if you are able to purchase the property at a price that is under its current market value, or as your appreciation and mortgage payments start to differ over time, you will build equity in this property. So you will have extra money to be able to use for either maybe further investments or retirement, or however you want to use that equity. Appreciation, so as the market appreciates, you will be able to take advantage of that. And then also tax benefits. And next month we have a CPA named Gennaro coming in to talk with us specifically about the tax benefits of investing in real estate as a real estate professional, which the three of us on this call are, as well as a non-real estate professional, which many of our clients are. And there are differences in how you can take tax benefits based on what you do in real estate. So he'll go through each one of those so that we know what our clients are facing and how they can use real estate as a tool in their wealth portfolio. Okay, determining rents and market positioning. Fran, I'm really interested to see how you do this. I mean, you have many units that you're able to pull rents from, so you can probably do a little self-sourcing on what the market rents are. But I have been using a tool called Rentometer, as well as looking at Zillow, apartments, Facebook Marketplace, etc., just to try and see if I'm thinking of buying, I don't know, a duplex with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 2-car attached garage. What could I get for that rent? Do you use any of these tools, or what cautions would you give to anybody trying to find market rent?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I'd much prefer it be the opposite, but it's more art than science.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly we have access to back-end data analytics that allow us to use a more scientific approach. But the reality is there's so much minutia with each individual property. And market response isn't necessarily a great source of feedback. As an example, Facebook Marketplace on there, you can essentially put any property ever out on Facebook Marketplace and you will get a million folks asking you about it. The reality is we track, like, because we also advertise on Facebook Marketplace among many other places, like it's many hundreds of folks reaching out to us for a property that eventually translates to a single application. And then
Mm-hmm.
of those applications, specifically from Facebook Marketplace, the bulk of them are not qualified. Similarly, like there's, you can, if you overprice a property, there's like a thin gray line, right? Like where you want to maximize rents. But if you go too far above that, if you think about who you want your tenant to be, kind of that ideal avatar, you want someone who's fiscally responsible and they're accountable for their actions. They want to take it, you want essentially a good tenant. And generally speaking, those folks aren't willing to overpay. So if you price it too high, it's likely you'll still get interest. It's just oftentimes they're desperate tenants that don't qualify for other places, and you end up, in a situation where it's like, well, you potentially could get more, but you're taking a higher risk. So
Mm-hmm.
we shoot for, like the perfect blend of high rents for that specific unit. Just because, obviously everything else is high, like insurance is crazy, taxes are going up and up. The actual price of the building has increased substantially over the last few years. And so we shoot to get our clients the highest return that they can while still accepting a quality tenant.
Mm-hmm.
We do look at Rentometer, Zillow, apartments.com. Specifically, we're looking at other listed comps. A couple of watchouts though is like Zillow is a really good example. There's current listings that show that we know have been rented for eons. How quickly they update their listings is often very good, but some of those listings will stick around for a long time. Will give you a false sense of what the market is, because you might be looking at an ad from last year and it says that it's
Mm.
2 weeks old. Rentometer, I don't know exactly what their algorithms are. It's careful. You have to be careful to not fall into the trap, because it'll give you, you know, the median rent for a pretty wide margin. A mile or two difference might not seem that big
Yeah, it's
on
usually
paper.
like what I just described, a 3-1 could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, plus or
Exactly.
minus $1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even beyond that, like a mile difference is a tremendous difference in terms of location. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be careful with that. We find that it tends to generally overestimate. But not always. It's just it seems to be skewed that way, and I don't know if their algorithm takes into account midterms or short-term rates as well. It may not. It could just be looking at, highly dense, highly, specifically like amenitized buildings that are kind of skewing that rent amount. But yeah, fortunately, internally, we're large enough that we have a really good pulse on the market, simply because we manage so many units and we get direct daily, hourly feedback on performance in the marketplace.
I think you make a good point, though, about overpricing or trying to reach for that top level price. And that's not just in tenancy, that's also in sale of property, right? We have to work this psychology on both sides of the work that we do. And I read a post by Matt Larson this morning that said consistently that he has underpriced his rentals 10 to 15% from where he thinks market rent is. And that does allow him to have long-term invested tenants, because your biggest cost in all of this is going to be maintenance and turnover, right? And if you can give somebody what feels like a deal, they will be more likely to not call when they need a light bulb removed or changed. They will be more likely to do a little bit of extra work to be able to stay there. They will be more likely to stay longer term, so you can decrease your biggest cost if you're
Yeah.
not greedy on the front end.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And it's just math, right? Like if you have something that's more attractive, you're going to have more people apply for it. A larger
Mhm.
applicant pool, generally, you're going to have a higher quality tenant.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, running cash flow analysis. I find that most people look at real estate cash flow analysis and they look mostly just at what is the rent and what is the mortgage. And if those things are different, if there is more rent than mortgage, then it's a good investment. And I
Mhm.
want to caution people on that. That is not the full picture of what it is to own a long-term rental property. So I do want you to make sure that you account for all of the income, first of all. So there may be, gross rents, of course, but there may also be other opportunities for other property income. It's not going to be as much, but maybe you'll have parking, maybe you'll have laundry, maybe you'll have a couple other things in there. So take that into account. And then your expenses, not your debt to begin with, just look at your other expenses. Will you have a property manager? We'll talk about that in just a minute. Why you would want to self-manage versus hire a property manager. Are you going to be paying any utilities? So we talked about on the estoppel version, right? We talked about, does the tenant pay electricity, gas, water, or does the landlord pay any of that? Take that into account. Most people remember their property taxes and insurance, but sometimes not. Maintenance and vacancy. I personally always plan for 10% maintenance and 10% vacancy. That is a personal choice. You can go up or down on that, but these are the numbers that I plan for, just to be safe and make sure that I have enough.
I think we lost you again.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so you just said that there is 10% that you plan just to make sure, and then you
Yes.
kind of yep.
Okay. So I personally plan for 10% maintenance and 10% vacancy. That is a personal choice. Some people I know do less and some people I know do more. But it's a good starting place to start at 10% for maintenance and 10% for vacancy every single month. That allows you to get through needing to change a furnace or needing to plan for 3 months of vacancy in the wintertime. So I always plan for that. So the property management, the utilities, the maintenance, and the vacancy, those are not common investment. if you're not careful. So as you're looking at cash flow analysis, it's not gross rents minus mortgage. You have to take into account your other expenses as well. I'm sure there are, a couple other categories that you would add in here, Fran, but I think this is a good start. Any comments on this?
And you're absolutely right. Like it's a personal choice. There's a million ways to kind of make money and run your numbers. From a personal standpoint, and I will preface this with literally all of the experts will disagree with me, so I'm not recommending you do this. But when I'm personally evaluating a property for my own portfolio, I don't take into account vacancy. And again, the opposite of what almost everyone will tell you. And my rationale there is vacancy is so transient in the sense that 10% this year, right? But assuming rents go up 3% or 5% next year, it's going to erode so quickly that I don't want to say no to a great 30-year deal because my vacancy rate for the next 1 to 2 years is going to be too high to make those numbers seem attractive enough for me. So because it erodes so quickly based on rental increases, and it truly is an estimate in the sense that depending on the property type, if I have a single family home, it's either 0% vacant or 100% vacant. And
That's right.
so it is a real cost, but it's so slippery, I don't take it into account. And then in terms of maintenance, for me personally, again, I run my numbers a little bit differently, and that maintenance figure is largely influenced by the condition of the property that I'm purchasing. If it is, in pretty tough condition and I'm completely renovating it, I'm taking that essentially looking at it as part of the acquisition cost. And then I don't expect maintenance to be very high for the next 10 years if everything is redone. But if I'm, buying a pretty well used up property and my plan is to continue leaving it as is for a while, I'll have a higher maintenance amount kind of
Higher
allocated towards
maintenance.
it. So
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. Those are the costs. It's just, for me personally, I like to tweak it a little bit depending on the property.
Mhm. It's like buying a car, right? You buy a brand new car and you don't anticipate very much happening with it. You're probably under warranty for a bit. And if you buy an older car, a used car that's been around for a while, you have to plan for maintenance costs.
Yeah, exactly right.
What I do with these, so I typically build up my maintenance account to be a certain amount. So I usually get to $10,000 per property. And then I start, using that money for other things for maintenance, just because then $10,000 per door per property, I generally am able to cover most of the things that will come through, and then I'll just build that back up again. And the
For
same
sure.
thing with vacancy. Like I will build up 2 or 3 months of mortgage payments just to make sure that I can cover anything if I do end up having the property open for a little bit of time. But once I've built up that 2 or 3 months of vacancy reserves, then I move that money into other things.
Yep.
And
Thanks
and
for
what I usually turn that into, this is my own personal strategy, but I usually turn that into further debt pay down. Okay. What would you advise people on when they should decide to self-manage and when they should decide to work with someone like you?
Um, so full disclosure, before I started working as a professional property manager at Vantage Point, I self-managed everything 100% all the time. And I was pretty adamant that that was the way to go. Um, from a high level perspective, there's a lot of benefits in the sense that even as a self-manager, especially in the beginning, my general attitude was I certainly don't want to pay commission for someone to collect a rent check. And it didn't even occur to me that all of this stuff that I had to do for my properties was actually property management. It wasn't literally just collecting a check. And so I think there's a lot of value in self-managing just from the perspective of you learn what it takes to manage a property. And you really get, for those folks that really want to be involved in the details, um, it's a great way to start out. You can find out all sorts of minutia that you would never imagine is going to be useful.
Yes.
And if later you decide to hire a property manager, it'll help you kind of appreciate the work that they're doing behind the scenes, right? Because a good property manager, if they're doing the job well, um, basically makes it seem really, really easy to own property. Flip side, I will tell you that there are countless properties that I passed on that I should have purchased because I was self-managing. I did a lot of the work myself. I didn't have any what I thought, all of the things that I thought were, I didn't have the money to pay people to renovate stuff, so I do a lot of the work myself. And so like there's specific properties where, yeah, it's a good deal and it made sense from a numbers perspective. It's just I didn't have time to renovate a bathroom this weekend because I was still working a
Mm,
full-time job and I had another project going on and so I wouldn't. And so property management specifically will change your very active investment and frankly, depending on your cash flow, probably a relatively low paying job to a passive investment. And if scale is what you're looking for, it is, in my opinion, the best way to scale. Obviously, you're going to want to work with different property managers to identify one that really makes sense for you. Check with other investors, check on, references, have a conversation with several different ones to see who's, each strategy of different property management companies or where your contacts would be, who you get along with, those kinds of things. Most importantly, understand what the expectation is related to the level of communication, both your expectation and what they're willing to offer. And if that aligns, then, it's worth exploring potentially. There's kind of two schools of thought in the sense that like what I did is I self-managed first, eventually transitioned to a property manager. Other folks are focused on scaling right from the get-go, and they hire a property manager, door number
right away.
one and there probably isn't the level of appreciation in terms of like all the like minutia that goes into property management, but the reality is like who cares? Like that
Hmm.
won't impact whether or not they're able to scale. As long as the job is getting done, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
And from the highest level perspective, I would say if you do opt to self-manage, residential real estate is one of the most litigious areas in all of ever. Like there's so many rules, like obviously
All
as
of
agents,
ever.
you guys know, yeah, I mean, there's just like so much minutia. And property management specifically, we're licensed salespeople and we're a licensed brokerage, but we went through the same education as you. So there's almost nothing in the sales course that relates directly to property management. So we have to hire other experts to teach us to do the right things and make sure that, we're working with attorneys to get our leases set up correctly and all the disclosures are and all those things. If you're just dabbling in it, there's a fair risk. Like again, example, like my very first duplex that I ever owned, I was super proud of it. I was 21. I loved it. I wrote the best listing description in the history of listing descriptions. And a big part of that was, directly very similar to a sales listing, but it's like family friendly, right next to a park, et cetera, et cetera. And then day one of like property management, I learned that like I violated fair housing like 15 times. So, it's important to not do those things because there's big risk to you and your properties.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one of the biggest litmus tests that I give to my clients too when they're considering becoming investors. Maybe they're not professional real estate people. They have other jobs, other priorities in life. And I go through what it takes to legally manage properties, to understand your leases, to understand your notices. And I do have a comment on that in a minute. Some places where you can learn to do those things, but you do have to be invested in really learning the rules and regulations of residential real estate.
Right. Like to that end, like how much time are you going to invest in, like, say
Hmm.
your cash flow is $200 a month or $500 a month, even like, are you willing to put in hours and hours of work for that cash flow? Because you have to keep it up, right? Like you have to keep up that
And what
education.
is your time worth?
Exactly.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that I would say is if you are hiring a professional, you are now turning what could be a very, and that's not to say that management companies don't have relationships with tenants. They certainly do. But it can be really hard. And I did this, I struggled with it, frankly, quite a bit when I was self-managing. If you get to know your tenants really well and they're going through a hard time and like whatever else, you tend to be very flexible with things, you keep the rents low, etc. And that's great as a human, not a great business decision. And a property manager will help kind of separate that because it truly
Go
turns
for that.
spending into a business. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Marketing rental properties. I think we actually did talk about this a bit, so I'm going to skip ahead to tenant screening and selection. So speaking of litigious items where you can get yourself in trouble, you
Hmm.
do need to make sure that as you are receiving applications for your properties, that you are going through them and evaluating them on an equal playing ground, right? Taking into account fair housing, of course, making sure that you're making sure that you're using the appropriate guidelines on what you can and cannot use as screening criteria, but also that you use the same ones for every single tenant that comes through. So I always make sure that people have a checklist written down of what it is that they're screening for. Pair that with anything that they need to take into account with fair housing laws, but making sure that you have that written down on what is it that you're screening for and use it every single time for that property. Any lessons learned on this one, Fran?
I mean, that's fantastic advice. The reality is, like, it is, in my opinion, the very best way from a process standpoint is to have a written specific procedure for this, even if you have one rental property, one door, whatever.
Right.
Because if fair housing comes a knock and you have to be able to say, like, this is exactly the process I follow, and it doesn't violate fair housing at all. Because inevitably, someone who you deny is going to feel upset about that. And if there's a complaint, you have to, the onus is on you as the property owner or the person screening to essentially say, like, here's my process. It's not because they're, blue or because they're purple or because, this specific religion or whatever it is, or they drive a red car. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, you have to be able to prove that you're not violating fair housing versus the other way around. So they don't have to prove
Right.
that you are, because so much of it is a perception thing. So your advice is fantastic.
One thing that I get asked a lot is if I have two tenants that both seem to be qualified, do I have to go with the one that came in first? Or how do you decide if you have a couple people that seem qualified?
Yep. Essentially follow your process. As long as you're consistent about it, then you're not technically in violation, right? So, in order to eliminate the highest potential risk, it would be the first qualified tenant, assuming they meet your qualifications. But others, depending on which company you're working with or whatever you decide personally, like, you can have, a prioritization method of those as long as you're consistent about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Running credit background and eviction reports, I typically just have my applications go through a system that runs credit and background and eviction reports for me. And you can do that through many different systems, right? You can get it for a small cost on apartments.com or other places. You can do it through your CRM, sometimes your rent management systems. But I always have my tenants log into that. They pay for that. They put in all of their information. So I'm not seeing their social security number. I'm not putting in any of their information. That's all private to them. And then the report is sent to me. Is that how you do it too, Fran, or recommend other people do it?
It just depends on scale. So certainly what you're describing is probably the most common way for smaller landlords to do it. Absolutely. We actually don't do it quite that way in the sense that we still get the information, but we do a visibility to it and we run it internally. Um, but we had to go through many different types of checks. Like, so we had to have the credit reporting agencies come here and validate that we have secure files and secure IT stuff. And so we had to clear these hurdles in order to make sure that we were running effectively while still protecting people's information.
Mm-hmm. You mean you
But
don't
what
just get
you're
their social security number on a piece of paper and keep it on your desk? You mean?
it's weird. We don't do that. No, no. In fact, some of our staff can't even see the Social Security. So unless you're directly involved with actually processing applications, it's obfuscated within our software, which it's nice just because it helps reduce potential liability there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't do any paper applications anymore where people are writing down their employment, they're writing down their social security number. Having that on paper is a risk for me. I'm not interested in that. So I send them the link to be able to do that because I don't want to have to clear those hurdles as a small landlord.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the way I would do it too.
Mm-hmm. And then do you recommend that people verify employment? So they give you their employment. Do you call their employer and verify that they are actually working, or is there a different way to do it?
Yeah, so we would recommend, and we do employment verification. It is shocking how many false like pay stubs we get. Like on a
Mm,
monthly basis, it's probably several dozen. There's
wow.
programs out there that are just designed to do it. You can go, it's AI, like it's fantastic. They're well done. So we do reach out to employers, we verify employment. We request verification of specific income. One thing I would add to your list, and maybe later, is we also try to check with landlord references. And to be candid, their existing landlord is pretty much useless in the sense that either in most cases they're a quote fantastic tenant, because they actually are a fantastic tenant, or because the landlord's trying to get rid of them. So
Yes,
our best bet
exactly.
is, yep, we try to go back at least one more to talk to someone who has no skin in the game. The nice thing is you can see kind of what their history is as it relates to when they moved out of a unit, if they have an outstanding balance, if they trashed the place, if they left stuff behind, et cetera, et cetera. And so you talk to someone who's not going to be impacted by whether another tenant stays, and you can usually get a much more candid answer.
Yeah, I very rarely call the just previous landlord, right? Because
Mhm.
as you said, right, sometimes they're moving out and it's a good situation. Sometimes they're moving out and they're just, thank goodness they're leaving. I can get my property back.
Right.
And they're not going to tell you, they're not incentivized to tell you the truth.
Exactly. Exactly.
But the landlords before are incentivized to tell you the truth. Now, let me ask you how you go about verifying that if they have not rented recently in the past. Let's say that they have owned their home for a while, they're moving into a rental now for whatever happened in their life, and you can't verify prior rental history. What do you do then?
That's a good question. So it does happen. We're fortunate in two ways. Like one, we have a like essentially a matrix of approval. So rental verification, positive or negative, is one component of whether or not they are approved. And so if ultimately we can't get one, it's not the end of the world. We still might move forward with approval. The other thing is we pay for, in addition to getting their credit score, it's called an AI score, which is not super creatively named. But it's a score generated by AI that uses much of the same information from the credit score, but it's tooled specifically towards whether or not they're going to pay their rent on time versus debts in general. And so, from an internal standpoint, we piloted that for probably 18 months and just correlated it to like, is the tenant actually paying on time? We found a really good correlation in terms of what that score is. So we've moved it more heavily into the matrix to um, essentially have more weight. So it's not everything, but it is for us. It's a really good indication. If we're unable to get a rental reference, we can rely on that score. Other things would be, if they own their own home, whether or not they made their mortgage payments on time is going to be a pretty big, likely candidate that you can look to see if they're essentially paying their housing on time in the past. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's an option. Credit score in general, whether or not they pay their debts on time. And you can do things to potentially offset it. So again, I'd refer you back to your own process that you wrote out. But if you say like, hey, I can't get a rent verification, and in that case, if I can't get one, I'm going to increase the security deposit to offset the risk. If that's part of your process, that is something you can do.
As long as you have it documented as part of your process and it's not a
Exactly.
one-off exception that you made. You get in trouble
Yep.
with one-off exceptions. If you make it part of your process, then that's fine. And you can, people have asked me too, well, I've learned some lessons throughout, my self-managing career. Can I change my process? And the answer to that is
Cindy, I think she's making us wait with bated breath here.
Yeah.
oh no, am I back?
You're back.
Yeah, yeah. You cut out the answer to that is and then nothing. So
Goodness, am I back? Give you on tenterhooks there on a cliffhanger.
yeah.
What I was saying is that I have had people ask me, okay, am I back?
You are.
My goodness. Am I here?
Yep.
Now you are.
Okay. Okay. What I have had people ask me is,
Uh-oh, we lost
We
her.
lost her. Yeah, she's done.
I think she'll probably come back here.
So are you a realtor as well, or just property manager?
Technically a realtor, but we don't sell property. We focus primarily on managing property for others.
Okay.
The reason for that is we wanted to stay aligned, right? Like we didn't want to chase the commission. We wanted to just provide appropriate value as it relates to assessing properties for rental income.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Plus, that way we get to work with you fine folks, not compete.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And my son is very much interested. He's 19 and very much interested in property investments. I'm just wondering, it's like, do I tell him to become a realtor for that background? You can ask Jenny now that she's back.
Yeah. Maybe.
No.
She's sort of back.
Kind of, sort of.
Her icon's back.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I mean, get him started young. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, he's got enough for a down payment already.
That's
So
awesome.
he's very focused. He's just moving back to Appleton, like at the end of the month. So I'm sad about that, but whatever.
That's fair. That's fair. For what it's worth, if I could do it all over again. So when I was 21, I bought a duplex and lived in half. But financing rules have changed, so you can actually buy up to 4 units and still get pretty favorable owner financing.
Okay.
So under conventional loan. So if you can get them into the 4 unit right up front, I mean, it would be a huge advantage.
Okay. I'll let him know that.
Yeah. Are you back with us?
Continue this.
I think she's making progress. Now we have her.
Yes. Oh, I saw a
Oh,
flash of her face.
yeah. Your network bandwidth is low, allegedly. All right, you got your screen back.
I can see you guys, but I am not sure if you can hear me.
Oh, I can
We
hear you
can hear
now.
you.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see if we can do this one last slide. And Zoom is telling me that I should not be working today. That's what's happening.
I think that's
Kicked me
true.
out like 3 times in a row.
Yep.
All right. So the last thing that we have then, so we have touched a little bit on, I don't know if you heard my comment on screening criteria, but essentially what I was saying is people have asked me if they can change their screening criteria based on lessons that they have learned throughout their self-management career. And the answer to that is yes, you can update your screening criteria based on things that you now have learned, but you have to timestamp it and you have to use that new screening criteria process for everything moving forward. So you can change things, you can update things over time, but you have to use it for everything moving forward, not just exceptions. All right, leases, non-standards, rules, regulations, amendments that you have in your leases. So a lease is not just a 1 or 2 or 3 page document that you download from the internet. It is longer than that. Leases can be and should be anywhere, like the lease itself is usually anywhere from 4 to 8 pages, depending on what you have in there. But then there are also non-standards, which help to outline what you are going to be looking at when you look at the security deposit at the end and what those charges are. You can think of this as just transparent charging, right? What is it if the tenant loses their keys? What will they be charged for? If the tenant doesn't take out the recycling on a regular basis, what will they be charged for, et cetera, going down. So there are a set of non-standards that there are some that are typical, and then there are some that you can add, but you want to make sure that you have transparent pricing for your tenants for security deposit charges. Same thing for rules and regulations. This is just how do you use the property and what are the expectations of living here as transparently as possible, getting the information to their hands. And then any extras or amendments, pet addendums or smoking addendums or any of the other items that you need, lead paint, all of the other things that you need to be able to manage this tenant. Any comments on that, Fran? Any other documents that we should make sure that we are aware of? I know
Yeah.
these first three in particular have caught people by surprise.
Yeah, like there's specific notices that have to be included in your lease. I would say no matter what, have a lease. If like I see your Wisconsin legal blank form, it's a great resource. Whatever you end, if you end up modifying your lease at all, I would have an attorney review it. The reality is, and I suspect, you know, our leasing packet is 20 pages long, so I'm sure ours is more
Mine too,
expensive for
start to finish.
Yep. Like I literally have on my desk here $15,000 bill from our most recent iteration of lease renewal, like the last time our attorneys went through. But again, real estate, residential real estate specifically, highly litigious. There is a lot of complexity as it relates to leases. Make sure you're doing them right, and you know, make sure an attorney is at least taking a look at it. And even then, you know, it can be still a battle. But it is important to try, just like you said, to set up those expectations. Like you want to have a good relationship with your tenant, and a big part of that is them understanding the rules,
Right.
and you know, being realistic with them.
Right.
You know, I've seen some over the years where it's like, I don't know, you can regulate that, but you know, if you want to make sure that it's fair for everyone. And most importantly, your leases include everything you need to. Uh-oh, I think we may have lost her again.
No.
Well, how we talk a little bit about repairs and preventative maintenance.
Right? Let's see. Oh, yeah, she's gone now.
Yeah. She might come back. I see if her name is still there. Interesting. I'm sure that's frustrating.
Are you in the Green Bay area or Fox City?
Yep, Green Bay.
Okay.
Oh,
All
she's
right.
back.
I am going to not share my screen anymore. We're just going to wrap this up.
Fair enough.
I think Zoom is really telling me that. But essentially, I think what we're trying to just say is, if you are self-managing, make sure you know your leases. There are changes that happen in legislation commonly, and sometimes it's every 2 or 3 years there's a big change, and sometimes it's every 2 to 3 weeks there is a big change, depending on the political climate and what's happening. So the reason that I had Wisconsin Legal Blank as the link down there is because the attorney who creates those leases, Tristan Pettit in Milwaukee, is keyed into the legislation in the state and in each of the different counties, and he updates them based on legislation and changes that are happening. So if you are using those, you have a better chance of keeping up to date on them. But the caution that I have for you is don't just go get a lease from there and keep using it for 5 years. Right? Keep going back, see when things are going to be updated. You might need to continually update your lease. And as you said, Fran, use a lawyer if you're going to make any changes, even just a few words, like make sure that it's legal, because there are many places where you can get caught here. And if you're going to use a lawyer, make sure you're using a real estate lawyer, because there are many different kinds of lawyers, just like many different kinds of doctors. So find yourself a real estate lawyer that is well versed in this. And you.
Oh, wait, you're back.
Okay. Using a real estate template like Wisconsin Legal Blank to start will help you, is what I said.
Absolutely.
Okay. I am just going to wrap this up. Any last words, Fran? Things that you wish realtors knew about working with property managers?
I think that, you know, and Cindy, I kind of touched on this during over your absences, but
One of my
um,
many.
yeah, like there's a lot of synergy that can happen. You know, obviously, real estate agents that want to sell properties. There's a lot of investors out there that want to buy them, and a lot of those investors are potentially um, a little taken aback by some of the just overwhelming accountability of being a landlord nowadays. Property manager could be a good tool in the tool belt in terms of, you know, helping kind of alleviate those concerns. Frankly, not even if they're just consulting with one right up front, rather than, you know, just get them over that edge to buy that first one. Because that first door is often the hardest, and then it just gets easier and easier from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm obviously a huge personal fan, as are I suspect you, of real estate investing. I think it's the easiest thing in the world. Like, you know, you don't have to be brilliant to do it. You just buy stuff, wait, and get rich. So, it's a great way to go.
Time is the component there, though. You wait for
100%.
it. That's right.
Yeah.
I just thanked you guys and I was on mute. So thank you guys
Yeah.
Fran, Jenny, for your time. Appreciate you
Absolutely.
guys
Thanks
sharing
for
the
joining
knowledge.
us, Cindy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll
Yeah.
see you next time.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.